Setting up the We Are Live. Oh, God damn it.
What?
I did a comment. I wrote, "We are live" on fucking Rev Nat's like post about what he's been doing lately. I'm like, it's the new Facebook layout. It sucks.
I hate it. I hate it so much.
I mean, I'm sure we'll all get fucking used to it, but it's like, ah. Oh, and I look stoned. We all look stoned in the initial capture. Fantastic.
Super.
I mean, I could take some stuff and we could just that way it's method.
Go for it.
If I got stoned before the show, it would be extremely counterproductive.
Do you just get all like,
yeah, I'm like easily confused, and I start like my mind starts to wander.
so you turn into me?
I get philosophical, but not about anything worth being philosophical about.
Yeah, so you turn into me. And you start getting really hungry, and
oh yeah,
you're like, man,
everything.
I could go for some cheese right now. That sounds delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of cheese, did you know that you think the moon was made of cheese? That's what I mean.
Yeah, pretty much.
Why, hello, and welcome to issue 563 of Geek in the City Radio. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Duran.
I'm one of your other hosts, Binarita.
And I'm your other host, Cable Hashitani.
What's up, friends?
It's Tuesday.
My belly is super full. I just ate.
Oh,
I ate
why is
too
it full?
much. I just ate too much.
What'd you have?
I made so Corn, the fake meat company, makes these like spicy breaded patties.
Oh yeah, they do.
So I had
love 'em.
spicy crispy chicken burgers.
Haven't you had enough of that? We had that yesterday.
Apparently not. And then like a side of potato salad and chips, just like something like quick and easy because it's Tuesday.
Right.
And it was way more filling than I thought it would be.
Yeah, that corn's very dense. I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a boring cheese sandwich.
Just cheese?
Just cheese.
We had leftover curry.
Ooh. I started making my own curry a month or two ago. It's way easier than I ever imagined it would be. Mm-hmm. Although it might just be some like simplified American method.
I don't know. I mean, I think I read somewhere that curry is like a generic term for just a lot of like mixed and spices and how you use them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
You use curry paste, coconut milk, veggies, go nuts, and rice. That's all you need.
Sometimes I use paste for like if I'm making like I have a recipe for green curry, and that one calls for a paste. But other ones that I do more often are just like diced tomatoes and then like turmeric and curry powder or like masala, just like various powders.
Right.
And coconut milk. But which I buy by the case now.
Yep, that's the secret, non-secret ingredient in all curry. It's just coconut milk.
For like the last... Go ahead.
Sorry. I really, really thought that Cable was reaching off camera to grab and like, I don't know, hold up a can of coconut milk.
As like proof, like, look it.
I'd have to reach all the way into the kitchen.
And you were not the elongated man.
Oh, speaking of which.
Yeah, they're... go ahead.
I saw a headline that they're going to recast him, but then they're just going to like pretty quickly do away with the character after that.
They said they're not killing him. They said they're not killing him off. They may bring him back, but they're just going to kind of show up a little bit. Yeah.
Too bad, Cable, that the character's going to go away?
Yes, because they spent so much time this last season creating the character of Sue. I forget what her maiden name was.
Oh, sorry. Right.
Can't remember either.
She's she's the woman that becomes Elongated Man's wife. And Sue and Ralph Dibny were the go-to couple in the DC universe for a long period of time. Like, they didn't have Sue didn't have superpowers. She just helped Ralph run the detective agency, and Ralph stopped going by or stopped having a separate identity. He was just Ralph Dibny, the Elongated Man, and went public with it.
Right.
And they just they spent all of season 6. Was this season 6?
7, I think.
No, it's season 7's coming up. They just did trailers for season 7.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Introducing her character, Sue Dearbont, that was her name, and the actress that they had playing Sue and Hartley Sawyer had really, really great on-screen chemistry together, and they worked really well. So it was going to be one of those things. It's like, so you're going to spin them off into, like, you may not spin them off into their own show, but you have another couple that you can pop in on other CW shows. Or, they do their season on Legends of Tomorrow like everybody else does.
Right. They still might. You never know. Although, is this the last season of Legends coming up?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I always think that whatever season they just finished is the last one.
Yeah, with the previous season and their big Hello World finale, I thought that was going to be it.
Yeah, except it's not. Because they left it on a cliffhanger, and it's on the schedule for 2021.
Right. I did always like it when Ralph and Sue in the comics were written kind of like Nick and Nora.
That's because that's what they are.
That's what they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then we don't. I hate what they fucking did to him in the comics.
We don't speak of this.
The only redeeming factor, but then they never went and revisited it, was at the end of 52. When they were both ghosts, and they were both and his, even as a ghost, his nose went twinkled, and she was like, "Ooh, do you sense a mystery?" And he's like, "Of course, darling." And I was like, "Oh, are we gonna get ghost investigators?" I was like, "I'll read that comic. This might be the only good thing to come out of that fucking identity crisis." No, they dropped it. It's like,
I still hate. To me, that was the beginning of the end of what they were doing with all of their characters.
Yeah. That is where DC, the comics, got really fucking dark for me. And I was like, and they never felt the same. Every once in a while, you'd get elements that were nice, but Identity Crisis was a bad moment for DC. And I think we're still, a lot of people that called the shots are still fucking there. Because I saw it making the rounds today. I just found a digital copy, or I bought a digital copy of the 3 Jokers, the first issue. I just didn't like it at all.
I'm shocked.
It's just unnecessarily mean. And it got me thinking, I don't think Jeff Johns has written anything that was fun since his early Green Lantern Corps stuff. Everything's just gotten dark and mean and violent and ragey. Right.
Again, that gets back into that's what creators and these companies think that their public wants, and that's what the public says that they want, but I don't think they mean that at all. I don't think they know what they want.
Yeah. It's just weird to go back and revisit his run on JSA and be like, this can't be the same guy. I mean, I know everyone evolves, but jeez.
Yeah. Well, everyone goes through a dark period too, and some people don't come out of it.
Yeah, I guess that's
so. There's always the hope that maybe this will be a phase for him.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much longer he's going to be at DC, considering what we talked about before.
Yeah, womp womp.
Yeah, Bean, I don't know if you heard that. Warner Entertainment has officially hired outside investigators to investigate what happened on the Justice League set with Joss Whedon and Jeff Johns and Joe Berg.
No.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the rumors are. That initiated this investigation.
The biggest rumor is that, and apparently this is true on many Whedon sets, is that he does not cultivate a healthy and safe filming environment.
Joss Whedon?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that involved, and apparently there was some other like shady stuff that I have no idea what it's about, but it would be nice to see some of these companies start to clean house a little bit.
I think we should use the term allegation rather than rumor.
Yeah, that
Like
works.
now that there's an investigative team involved, like they have means that the rumors have turned into, hey, I'm coming forward with this, and they're like, oh, we're going to hire people to investigate this. That's an allegation.
Yeah, no, that's true. That makes
No, for
more
sure.
sense.
That's
Yeah,
a much
yeah.
better word. I just I had zero context off of like what
Yeah.
exactly the situation was. So
And apparently, the actor that played Cyborg, you said,
Yeah, yeah.
what was the last Fisher something, or what was his
Ray,
name?
I want to say Ray Fisher, but I don't think that's right.
I think that's what you said.
Yeah, Ray Fisher. That is right. Yeah.
He's the one that brought these allegations forward at the beginning of July. Did you say, or June?
June. I think it was either June or July 1st when he flat out brought it up on Twitter about it.
Good. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff Johns has done some, like, we get that people have relationships because people are human, but the fact that he was keeping secret his relationship with the woman that was running DC Entertainment.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I missed that one completely somehow.
Ray
Oh,
Fisher
yeah.
was.
No,
No,
Jeff Johns.
Jeff Johns.
I know. I feel like I'm supposed to know who that is, but
Jeff Johns was one of the creative heads at DC Comics.
Yeah,
Ah.
and you'll see his name a lot on CW shows. I think he's a producer on most of the superhero ones.
Yep, including
especially
Stargirl.
Yeah, Stargirl and the Flash. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, I didn't know that part. Wow.
Oh yeah, the woman who came in and was put in charge of DC Comics, like this was like 5 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago.
Something like that.
They've been romantically involved for years, and it just came to light like 2 years ago, and everyone went, "Oh, well, that explains why he's in the room doing all of this stuff. That's not okay. None of that's okay."
Right. Yeah, so
I think that's why he had to step away from comics entirely, or do something. Like he had to step away from something that he was doing actively. It's like, oh,
Right.
sorry, I'll just go over here and not do that.
yeah. I think the woman running DC now also used to be the head of like Scholastic. Which actually seems like I feel bad. Like a third of that company people are going to be out of work soon, and that sucks. But that upper management needed a serious house cleaning. And
I mean that's probably true in most organizations.
especially recently, yeah. But if the woman in charge, who I think it is, yeah, she's ran Scholastic for years. And if you are in the business of, whatever, quote, selling funny books to kids, how about you put the woman in charge who's been running like the biggest fucking kids imprint ever? There was a quote that went out.
Sense.
Yeah, there was a quote that went out, I guess, a few days ago on Twitter. It's I don't know all the details, but this this woman was at like a comic sellers event or a convention or something, and she went up to, I don't know, I think she went up to like Bob Harris and had mentioned like, well, have you thought about getting some of your graphic novels into Scholastic? And he said, what's that? She's like, Scholastic, it's the biggest book fair that is in every single school and library in
Must
North
not have
America.
kids.
And he said, I never heard of it. And that's when she was like, oh, they have no idea what they're doing at these companies. And if you look at kind of the books that they've been announcing since the big shift, I mean, they're still going to do their regular stuff, but there's a huge focus on middle reader and YA original books now. Like, even with established characters, they are really understanding like, hey, we need to sell to 10-year-olds. because our core audience is literally dying off.
I think that's a different woman.
Mm. Okay.
The Diane Nelson is the person I was talking about.
Okay, yeah, no, this is because I think she's gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of her relationship with Jeff Johns.
Okay, yeah. Comics, man, they're a hell of a thing.
Yep.
Well, and now these days there's even more of a like interwovenness between people in the comics industry and people in Hollywood.
Sort of. Like I didn't watch DC Fandom, but apparently there were all kinds of people who work in comics that put together hours and hours of content and panels and interviews, and none of that saw any airtime because they suddenly went, oh, we're going to split it in two, so all the comic stuff is in September.
Oh, is that what they did?
Yes. The August one that was heavily hyped and everyone was tuning in for was all TV and movie and video game. And none of the actual comics that any of these characters come from.
It's what happens when you're owned by AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so although maybe in a way, maybe it's better that all the comic stuff get their own separate day so they don't get lost in all of the all the announcements and shit.
I agree with that. I think it gives them an opportunity to actually talk about comics.
It's like all those fucking years ago when I fucking launched my Dark Anna Kickstarter like the day the Avengers trailer came out, and I was like, "Oh, come on, man!" But I have to give credit. This person, I now know her, Brittany. She was basically running Marvel's social media page that day, and apparently took pity on me. So for like 10 minutes, like Marvel had retweeted, and they're like, and don't forget the comics that are still getting made after you watch this trailer. And I was like, oh, thank you. That was so sweet of you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but I remember seeing this like, well, there goes, okay, yeah, the Avengers just got dropped. No, it was really nice of her. Like I wrote her direct, and like when I found out who she was, I was like, thanks for throwing me a bone on that one. That was pretty cool. So later on, in about 10 minutes, we're going to have David Pepose on again.
Yeah. He's going to talk to us about a new project that he's got in the works, correct?
Yeah, it's on Kickstarter right now. It's called The Oz, Issue 1. He's not going to need the Geeking the City Radio bump, but it'll still be good to talk to him. His initial goal was 6,000, and he's just under 30,000 right now.
Oh, wow.
So he's doing just fine, but it'll still be fun to talk to him.
It is so crazy to see just the variety of ways that a Kickstarter can roll out. I feel like it's actually more common than not for people to just blast their initial goal super, super quick, like in under a week.
Yeah, there's actually this weird algorithm that people have figured out, and even Kickstarter talks about it, that even if you think your project's going to take, say, whatever, like 15,000 to happen, a lot of them will be like, you know what, but pitch it at like 9, and then kind of work into a stretch. There's something about when people see a really high number and you're relatively unknown, people balk at it, no matter how many successful campaigns you've run. But on the flip side, if you go too low, they think, well, then you probably actually don't need this money, or maybe that's not that good. There's also the same thing about how long to run a campaign. Like the sweet spot's usually 30 days, because you can go, I think you can do as little as 2 weeks and as much as 60 days. And again, they're like 30 days is kind of like that sweet spot. So that'll be kind of neat to talk with him about. I'll put the little thing in the chat for you guys too to check it out. So yeah, he's gonna pop on here in just a few minutes, but yeah, other than that, what else you guys been working on? Cable's probably just unpacking everything.
Getting closer to being done,
Yay! It's awesome.
It's always a good feeling.
and then I can actually spend more time building Lego.
I know,
have a lot more to build.
I have not started the haunted house that I bought.
Mm,
That is I have finished the script prize.
that's a good price.
Yeah, that's the okay. You finished the script. You can now go build this giant Lego set. Still don't know where I'm going to put it, but I'm going to build it.
That's the thing for me is I'm like, I don't have any room for stuff that should be displayed. I'm
Yeah,
tapped.
I'm
All I've
about
got
to
left is like the rest of this wall here.
Yeah, and you
But
got cool
that's-
shit hanging now.
Yeah, well, that hoop can come down at any point. Really, it's just a gap filler. But this is the only wall in the house that is not like full or like filled, strategically.
Right.
So,
Well, I'm putting up a new bookshelf in my office that will have room. So
I was thinking about doing floating bookshelves.
those are cool.
Just to
I
get
kinda-
stuff off my desk, really.
I kind of love those things. I think they look really great.
Little mini stacks floating against your wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I like it even more when they actually build them to look like they're also more books. Books on books.
Books on books.
Mm-hmm.
Books on books. Books on books on books.
Books on books and books and books and books and books.
I've been having a really quiet week. Just doing like lots of herbal stuff. So I was able to prune back some of my yard herbs, growing out
Yeah.
back, doing stuff with that. I made roughly 32 ounces of lavender infused oil. That was fun.
What are you gonna do with that?
I don't know yet. Some of them I'm just gonna give out as gifts. Maybe. I don't know. And I got those sage bundles I made.
Maybe after all the homebrew I've given you.
Yeah, I've got a ton, and I don't necessarily have plans for it. It's just, I actually probably shouldn't have made quite so much because I used up all of the dried lavender I had for that.
Yeah.
But you can do a lot of different things with the oil, so.
It's not like it won't grow back, like a beast next year.
Yeah. Again, I got those. I got all that lavender from the 2 bushes, right outside my house, basically.
Right.
Nice.
Outside the next door neighbor's house.
I made a meat pie.
Yeah, that thing looked good.
I'm super happy with it. It was really fun too. I'm gonna make more. I think it might be my new little kitchen obsession.
Oh, I made a green a salsa verde with all my tomatillos, my miracle tomatillos.
Where's mine then? I want some in my face.
I just made it today.
Oh,
I did
okay.
all of these things today.
Bring it over tomorrow.
Okay.
No, don't. I'll be writing all day long. It'll be no fun. I have also been getting a lot of outdoor Halloween lights and decorations. Since there will be no Halloween parties really this year, and you're not going to see any trick-or-treaters,
Yeah, probably
I am
not.
I'm basically turning my little side yard into the haunted mansion.
Yay!
I'm gonna have
Good.
little tombstones and those videos you can buy that project ghostly apparitions appear from your walls. I bought some of those to project outside. No, but these are they're not. No, I already have that. No, if you project them against you can project it against a window and it makes it look like something's in the actual window from the outside. And so I'm gonna put up this little sheet you can put up, and I'm gonna put it up right in front of our outdoor table. And then you project against it, and it looks like there are ghosts eating at the table, and then they get up and come at you.
Ooh.
I know. I'm kind of excited about
Spoopy.
it.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. And I'll just be living in my side yard, drinking pumpkin beers. And
I will be right there.
okay, and
I'm not even gonna wait. I'm not
I'll do
even gonna
nothing.
wait for it to be ready.
That's right.
You're just gonna be sitting there the entire time.
You can help me set it up.
Nope, she's just gonna be sitting.
She's like, nah. I'd rather you do all the work.
Look, I just came for the beer.
That's what her tombstone's gonna say. I just came for the beer. It's all gone, so I'm done. That'll be your tube.
Here lies
Here lies
Peterita. She drank all the beer.
The quote will be out of beer.
Nice.
Nice.
Oh, we've got an interesting conversation happening in the chat about.
I know we got to remember that they're like
kids. Kids are more comfortable with the digital formats versus it must be an old people problem that for the love of going to the comic shop and rifling through all of the actual physical comics and merch.
yeah, but kids do go to bookstores and they like it.
No, I don't know. I enjoy both. I find that I get a lot of use out of my Kindle tablet, for example, because I don't lose my page if I fall asleep reading, and that's usually when I do my most of my reading is like in bed before being asleep.
Right.
It's also great on trips. But,
yeah, which makes sense. Yeah.
I think it's wholly possible to get kids interested and into going to comic stores. I think that what I was responding to was a comment about price of comics. Oh, David is here.
I made it. Hi.
Oh, David.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you just shocking no one. You tuned in right as we were talking about how comics are too expensive for younger kids to buy.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, well, that is why we all get in the industry, is for the money and respect and professional.
Yes.
Yeah.
The status, the power, the glory. Yeah. Yes.
No, we were just talking about how we were just mentioning how like kids are actually reading a lot of comics, but a lot of it is either through like Scholastic or through digital because someone who's like basically under 20 grew up with an iPad. So why do they need to go to a store? Sure. And Cable is like, well, you can get them into stores. You just got to make a comic store more welcoming, and
And you have to like getting them started in the format digitally is how you get them interested in comics in the first place, and then as they build that interest and that curiosity about the form, that's where you take them to the store and show them even more and more and more.
What I was thinking is that like children are very tactile.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually, to me, and I know that like because their brains are forming and they're very adaptable, they are much better at picking up new technologies versus fully formed adults. But I think that they're just as capable of enjoying the physical parts of collecting and rifling through and physically reading paper.
They totally do. One of the biggest bummers about there probably being no trick-or-treating this year is for like the last 3 years, like Diamond has had those kind of like the same on New Comic Day, you could buy those bundles for like super cheap prices. Mm-hmm. I would buy like the Halloween stuff from like, Archie or like DC would do a Halloween one, or some of these companies would do like small Halloween books. And we'd have kids come over and on the table, they got a choice. Like you can have candy or you can have a comic. Like 9 times out of 10, they wanted the comic. Like they were, what's comic? So every time I hear like, well, kids just don't read comics, I'm like, that's 100% false.
Yeah,
you're just not making the ones that they want. Anyway, David, thanks for popping back.
Yeah, of course. No, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm glad that I got to hop in at the tail end of that conversation because
you caught us like in mid rant. Yeah. This is like what, your 20th podcast this week?
Something like that. It's pretty crazy. I literally just crash landed in from another podcast.
Yeah, well, it's clearly paying off because we used to joke that the show often gave Kickstarts the bump they need to go over, but you're like just under 30,000. So
I'll take the bump. Give me the Geek in the City bump. Okay.
We'll give you the bump so you can get the music released. That song.
I was going to ask him to give us the David Pepose bump.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'll take it. We'll bump each other's stuff. Sorry. As soon as I
easy there. You sleep on
totally
my couch
fine.
like once a year. It's gonna get weird now.
It's gonna get real weird for bumping each other's stuff.
It's gonna get weird now.
Listen, I remember
stuff over a fried egg sandwich.
Can I? Yes. Can I tell the story, Aaron? Can I tell it? Dick Grayson.
Oh shit! Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because you're leaving Newsarama, so we can.
I'm done. I wrapped up 2 weeks ago, so I can tell the story. It's the end of an era. I was there for 12 years. And
wow.
Aaron,
well, which Dick Grayson story? I have many.
Well, Dick. So you wrote a story. You wrote a review about an issue of Grayson or Nightwing or something like that.
I think it was the Zero. It was that fucking Zero Annual. It was that annual.
And you wrote in your review that you were worried that you were being overtly hard on Dick. And I had to I looked at that and I just remember laughing in my office and I had to email you and be like, you know what, being overtly hard and overly hard are two very different things.
As soon as I got your email, I was like, son of a bitch. I didn't mean to write overtly.
I love how that's a joke that we've remembered for like years at this point. But yeah, it's
I remember when you posted that giant picture on the old, not just peeling back the curtain here, on the old Best Shop Newsarama Facebook private group where all the people would claim books.
Yeah.
He put this big old like George Perez style picture of like every DC character. But of course with Grayson, like he's swinging through the air with his butt out. And like David's tagging everyone he thinks is like, okay, so-and-so is this character and she's this character. And he fucking clicks on Grayson's butt and that's where he tags me. He's like, and there's Aaron.
There's
getting overtly
Aaron.
hard on Dick.
Yeah, no, you know, that's
not wrong.
Is end of an era. I wrote for Newsarama for 12 years. It's the longest relationship I've ever had. I've been there since shortly after college. But yeah, you know, this was the time. You know, I was really fortunate. You know, I've got more projects coming out from more publishers. I have my new Kickstarter, the OZ. I knew I was getting to the point where I couldn't wear both hats comfortably for much longer.
Yeah, eventually it was becoming a line that was like going to get trickier and trickier.
It was already getting tricky to sort of. I wanted to maintain my integrity as a reviewer, not, you know, everybody could trust my word, but that meant I was having to avoid larger swaths, and it got to the point where it was going to be a challenge. And so the way it worked out was, you know, I spoke with senior editor Mike Duran, and there wound up being an opportunity to actually funnel resources into the review team, which is something we've never been able to do before. And I realized that if I could put the money that I made into the pot, it would give more money to the reviewers. And I realized that I was like, oh, well, you know, that's always been the goal since day one. You know, when I started writing at Newsarama, there was nobody got paid. There were no review copies. There was one column a week. And so the fact that I was able to leave the place better than I found it, that was the perfect way to go out. So yeah, you know, I mean, certainly no bad blood. You know, they ran an interview on my book, you know, the week after I left. So but yeah, it's weird, you know.
It's just weird.
It's weird going through my day and not having to think about what I need to review that day. And thank goodness, because I'm telling you, this Kickstarter, I love Kickstarter, but it's a totally different planet with its own laws of physics. This feels like I've been doing a con for the last 8 days, and I've got 21 more days to go.
A Kickstarter campaign is basically a full-time job on its own.
Yeah, and so it's so rewarding. I'm so grateful for it. But yeah, I don't have like an inch of extra bandwidth to do literally anything other than work in the book or promote the book. So,
right. Well, speaking of which, why don't you let folks know what the OZ is about?
Yeah.
Like, what's
sure.
this for?
So the OZ, the quick concept, it's what if Mad Max and the Hurt Locker took place in the Wizard of Oz? So
nice.
we've recontextualized Dorothy killing the Wicked Witch of the West as something like a botched regime change. And so when she clicks her heels together, goes back to Kansas, she's inadvertently left Oz in this horrific power vacuum that leads to years of brutal civil war. And so our story picks up a generation later with Dorothy's granddaughter and namesake. She's a disillusioned Iraq war veteran who's come back home to Kansas to kind of try to put the pieces of her life back together. She's come home with some trauma and guilt and scars from her time overseas. But unfortunately, a tornado strikes her small Kansas town, and she finds herself dropped into the war-torn land of Oz. So Dorothy's going to have to really confront her own past and her grandmother's legacy, as well as navigate her grandmother's former friends, if she hopes to survive the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ. So, yeah, it's a wild book. You know, I consider it somewhere tonally in between Mad Max Fury Road and Star Wars Rogue One. It's you know, it's my first crack at fantasy. Most people who know me, they probably know my work, Spencer and Locke, or Going to the Chapel, both of which are crime-related books. And yeah, this was one of the first ideas I came up with after the first Spencer and Locke.
Oh, so you've been sitting on this for a little while.
I've been working on this for 3 years.
Wow.
And just like any sort of comic book story, it's never on a straight line. It's really kind of a zigzag lightning bolt. I had come up with this idea speaking with a publisher, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's a really cool idea. You should flesh it out." And I really fell in love with it as the story as I built up the story, and we made it to the 1 yard line. We got run all the way up the flagpole,
Mm-hmm.
and it just so happened that there was another creator with a dark fantasy book that had been pitched at the same time. So I get it. Like, I don't begrudge anybody anything, because if you're going to pick, a writer with more track record versus the guy who just had Spencer and Locke, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
But the editor that I spoke with, they didn't have to do this, but it really meant the world. They told me, they said, look, this didn't go your way, but I don't want you to think it's a referendum on your work or the quality of this concept. This is a really good concept. You really should continue it. And that little act of kindness really made the difference for me. I sent that editor an email when the Kickstarter launched, just saying, we wouldn't have had the kind of success we did if you hadn't given that little bit of encouragement, which you really did not have to do. So yeah, we've been working on this for a while. I believe it was late 2017, early 2018. I first met Ruben Rojas on Twitter. He was answering a call for artists, which, just goes to show you sometimes those calls for artists actually do yield things. And I was just stunned that not only that he had not been picked up, but that he wasn't just like a superstar already. He's got this style that's kind of equal parts Dan Mora and Sean Murphy.
Right.
He's brilliant in the way that he lays out his panels. He's able to switch from action to emotion on a dime, but he's such a gifted designer.
Right.
The way that he fleshes out the Land of Oz and our surrounding characters, it's just gorgeous. And then when you put him in a room with Whitney Kogar, the colorist of the Eisner Award-winning Giant Days, you can't go wrong. And so, working with the two of them, as well as our letterer DC Hopkins, it's kind of like watching magic happen. And really, and we can talk about this a little bit more later, but there was a reason why I brought this to Kickstarter. And it was not about, can't this get published at a traditional publisher? First off, I think that stigma is long gone now that
that's so long and gone now.
But I would say that this was a deliberate choice, and it was because I had been looking at Kickstarter for a long time. It's a totally different readership and demographic than the direct market that I realized I had been doing no outreach to. And have it bring the OZ to Kickstarter, it really solved one problem with another. It kind of helped me bypass the sometimes at best chaotic acquisitions pipeline for traditional comics publishing. And it gives the OZ a home, but it lets me introduce ourselves to the Kickstarter community with our absolute best A game. So
Right.
it really, it's the best of both worlds. Just seeing the way how people have reacted, it really feels like a leap of faith rewarded.
Yeah, it looks like it's definitely paying off too, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's nobody can prepare you for a Kickstarter like this. I'm really fortunate. I'm friends with a lot of people who've done successful Kickstarters. Charlie Stickney from White Ash is a friend down here in Los Angeles. Ryland Grant just completed his Kickstarter for The Jump. There's a real kind of collective of LA-based comics creators who've all had success on Kickstarter. And they've all been very generous with their time and their advice, but they all said aim low, because I've worked in the direct market, but I've never done anything on Kickstarter before. So they're like, you have no data, you have no metrics, aim low. They said, I think the only person who did not tell me to aim low was Ryland Grant. So he was right. So we started at $6,000, and the mindset was, how do I get this funded in 30 days? And then we got funded in 2 hours. And it's kind of like going out for a sandwich and winding up on the moon. Like, there's no way to prepare for that level of like insane overshot. And so that's been kind of the fun, if exhausting, challenge of Kickstarter, is figuring out, we want to keep building that readership. We want to keep inviting more people to the table. But at the same time, we don't want this to have any appearance of being a cash grab. And so how do we keep adding value to the book? How do we add rewards that fit within our shipping infrastructure? How do we add rewards that we can distribute digitally?
Right.
And so that's been an interesting and fun and exhausting calculus through this process. But it's something that's so unlike the direct market that I've really been kind of learning this new planet and its laws of physics on the fly.
Yeah, as someone who's been there before too, you also have to weigh in the numbers of, because I've seen amazingly successful Kickstarters and then the creators are then broken because they didn't factor in shipping costs.
Yep.
They were creating stretch goals where all of a sudden they were shipping things that weighed like 5 pounds. Like, well, great, you just ate up everything with shipping.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen Kickstarters do exactly what you're talking about. And so, yeah, it's been thinking about, for example, our first stretch goal was a digital comics extravaganza. So we had, we have a dozen.
Oh, he froze.
Did I freeze? Hello?
Start over.
You're back.
Okay.
I'm back. After extravaganza.
Oh, a digital comics extravaganza where we have a dozen indie creators who have thrown in PDFs of their work. And that's a way to sort of, share that spotlight, with a bunch of people to add value to our readers. They're not just getting the 44 pages of the OZ. They're not just getting, the first issue of Spencer and Locke or the first issue going to the chapel anymore. Now they're getting a dozen books on top of that. It's things like our print. We're making it the size of the book. So that way, like, we're not doing anything outside of the Gemini mailers. Stickers, bookmarks, things like our theme song, which we just unlocked this morning. It's figuring out creative ways to add value. We're also talking with our printer, for example, about ways to do enhanced covers. So we're talking about possibly doing either UV raised stuff for our cover, or possibly a metallic option.
Oh man, hitting that 90s vibe, man.
Yeah, people we've had a lot of people say, metallic cover, they'd love to see it. And so, but yeah, it's that sort of calculus.
Don't you mean a tin cover?
There you go. I might, what? I've heard worse ideas. But yeah, it's, or adding pinups. We're working with some really cool artists right now on some pinups. Joe Mulvey from Spencer and Locke. He just showed me some thumbnails for a really cool one. So yeah, it's that sort of thing that, it's a juggling act, and it's not one that I anticipated, but it's the definition of a champagne problem to have.
Right.
And I think it just speaks to the level of connectivity and interaction that you have with readers on Kickstarter that I've never experienced before. Not at a con, not in a direct market release. It's really granular. You can communicate with every single reader individually. And, so I've made it a point, that to send thank you notes to every single person who has backed this campaign, because I think that little bit, that little gesture goes a really long way. People feel like they're being noticed. People feel like they're being seen. And that's really the appeal of Kickstarter, is that they feel connected to your work because they're helping bring it to life. Right. And, it's amazing. It's something that I've never experienced in the direct market. And, it has made this experience just so worthwhile, because at the end of the day, that's why I'm doing this. It's not about money, because the money's just going to pay for the book. It's about getting more readers and building that wider consensus.
Nice. See,
I think that's something that's commonplace behind people who back comics and back games and back other creative things on Kickstarter. It's they want to be part, especially for comic book people. If you grew up reading comics, you want to make comics in some way, shape, or form, and you may know that there's no way that you can write a comic or draw a comic, but this is a way that they feel like they can be part of that process. So that makes sense of why people get so emotionally invested in Kickstarters that they back.
Yeah.
You were mentioning earlier about how it's less true now, but maybe still a little bit lingering, is the stigma of publishing via Kickstarter, and how much that has evolved. But what's funny about there ever having been a stigma to that method of publishing is that it's actually a lot more like what it used to be, like way in the early days of print,
Sure.
because you have to know there's a market before you can spend the money to have it made. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with establishing um, establishing an audience before you go to print.
I think the what has happened, and I think post pandemic that stigma has been blown completely out of the water, is that everyone has seen publishers as some sort of stamp of approval, a barometer of taste. That if a publisher is willing to put their name on your product, then it must be good enough to put it at a bookstore, to buy. Comics especially are very brand centric. I mean, I think for a novel, you wouldn't necessarily know if this was Random House or Simon and Schuster. But comics, the publisher is the brand in a way that's very unlike anything else in entertainment. Even in a film, you wouldn't think, oh, well, that's definitely a Warner Brothers film, or that's definitely a Universal film. Maybe at best you'd say that's a Fox Searchlight or a Focus Features, maybe 15 years ago. But yeah, I think now people are realizing that they don't need to wait for permission anymore. That was really kind of the thing that you could call it the straw that broke the camel's back. For the OZ was I had talked with publishers who had said they were very interested in the book. But like I said, the pipeline is chaotic in the best of times. People's attentions are small. Things happen. They have fires to put out. And I can say there was one publisher I spoke with who it was like Groundhog Day. Like every 3 months, we'd have the same conversation. They'd say, "We really love this book. We should talk about this." And I'm like, "Yes, let's." And then 3 months later, we would do it all over again.
Yeah.
And
or the other thing where you're told like the industry, they're super hot right now. They're hungry for new people, and then all of a sudden the emails dry up 4 months later, and then you're reading how every comic company's tightening their belts. You're like, all right, we got to make up your minds.
Right. And so, for me, it was kind of like, oh, well, like I have 2 issues. I'd written 6 standard issues of the OZ. I had 2 of them drawn. What am I waiting for? Why wait for permission 1 second longer? And I think with the pandemic, particularly in comics, when Diamond had it shut down, I think that was like a seismic event. People were really starting to think, okay, maybe the way we've been doing business needs to change. And you see it with DC changing up their distribution, which I think is independent of Warner Brothers kind of doing their bloodletting, which was, that was company wide, not just DC.
Yeah, that was AT&T dropping the axe on like a third of the companies.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or you see companies like Scout or TKO or SourcePoint, where they were being really nimble, reaching out to comic shops who, it's interesting. I found some comic shops really wanted new content. They were like, we're desperate to sell stuff. And then others were like, we don't want new content. Like, we're trying to just make ends meet. Don't push new content on us. It's a real, catch-22. And I feel for any creator who is in that situation.
It was kind of interesting. I actually was watching, what was really fascinating was watching during all this, watching Vault Comics just go like gangbusters. They were calling every shop. They're like, how many do you want? We'll sell them to you at, like, what do you want? You want our stuff? We'll send you our stuff. We will physically drive our stuff to your shop if we're in the area. Like, they were relentless. It was pretty cool to watch.
I feel like Vault and Boom really kind of led the charge in a big way. And then I think, Scout and SourcePoint were kind of like, shoring up the rear there. Because, there were a lot of publishers who, they kind of just closed ranks. I mean, I as somebody who does like the big 2 and would love to do stuff with the big 2, I was really disappointed in the big 2's response to all of this, because they're the industry leaders and there's no consensus to be built if they're not at the table.
Which, that stands to reason. We've been having a problem with who should be leading doesn't, and we've been finding that everyone else on the lower decks have been able to kind of go, well, fine, we'll do it ourselves.
Right. I mean, you can say that's a metaphor for the whole country at this point. And I think, a lot of like COVID really made everybody kind of sit and think like, oh, how are we going to do business differently? There's no conventions anymore. We don't know if the shops are going to close. We don't know if Diamond, what Diamond's future is going to look like. And so I feel like between that and seeing people like Charlie Stickney, who I really consider a real pioneer for this thing, because he had been sort of mapping out the Kickstarter system pretty much around the same time I was writing Spencer and Locke. And he has had such success with White Ash and has done such a great job at conducting outreach, not just for White Ash, but for Scout Comics as a whole, that he's become the co-publisher. And I feel like, people are realizing, and Scout is kind of leading the way on this, that Kickstarter, there are people who that can be their whole career, their whole platform. They can do really well there, or they can have a second life in the direct market. And, there's really no wrong answers to that. The real concern that I have, and I've spoken with this with Charlie at length, is, especially by virtue of coming out on the same day as Scott Snyder, is that every direct market creator who's feeling a little shaky is gonna try their hand at a Kickstarter. The thing that they don't realize is, first off, you need to bring your A game. Not every kind of half-baked concept that you think is going to go great in Hollywood is going to work here. And secondly, it, like you said, it's a full-time job. So you got to be committed to a month of really kind of ringing the bell as hard as you can. And while yes, Kickstarter is about selling smaller numbers at higher price points, you're going to need some real outreach. So I hope Kickstarter doesn't turn into the direct market 2.0. I think that would be the worst possible outcome for any of this, because I hate to say it, I love the direct market, but we've screwed it up enough. But I feel like I do think that Kickstarter also has a degree of self-selection, and I think if what is being put up is not up to snuff compared to the really vibrant indie voices that have already made such long-standing platforms there, the Skies of Fire crew, White Ash, those sorts of books, I think they'll be in for a rude awakening. And so I have faith that the ecosystem might evolve, it might change, it certainly will become more competitive. And that's kind of why I'm glad that I've sort of gotten in now when I have, because if the OZ is done as well as it has, and we still have 3 weeks left, that maybe we can use that platform and build it towards future installments of the OZ, and then bring that hopefully to other projects that I'm working on as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the good goals of Kickstarter, is that you can build that audience there that maybe will never step foot into a comic book shop.
Yeah, I mean,
or doesn't very often,
Sure. Well, there's so many people that don't. You guys were probably talking about this before I hopped on, but there's so many people that don't know what a comic shop is. They don't know where they don't know they exist, let alone where they are.
They still have those? Like, I hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the people who may have taken a shot and they had either a bad experience at the comic shop, or probably more likely there's just we're dealing with series that have hundreds of issues, and so they don't know where to start, and it's very overwhelming. And why would you bother? Whereas Kickstarter, I keep harping on Skies of Fire. They're on issue 7 now. It's all still very approachable. And I think the other thing that Kickstarter does that I think the comics industry as a whole could really stand to learn from. And granted, there's, I think, fewer books on Kickstarter, but Kickstarter, they want to keep you in the ecosystem. And so they do a really good job at marketing everybody's work.
Yeah.
I get updates from Scott Snyder's Kickstarter, and I see ads for mine. And I think that's amazing. If he's at $150,000, that's $150,000 commercial for me. Rising tide on Kickstarter floats all boats in the way that it does not in the direct market. The direct market, by virtue of retailers having to take the risk on every single issue, it means
you're not competing for shelf space on Kickstarter.
You're not competing for shelf space. You're not competing for dollars. You aren't competing for attention. Right. Kickstarter wants you to buy as many books as you can. They want to keep you in that because they get a cut of every campaign. They want you to succeed. And so, the way that they really signal boost and have signal boosted our book in a big way, I'm very impressed. And it makes me feel like, oh, this platform is really, it's worth the investment. It's worth the time, in a way that, and I love the direct market, and I've had a lot of success in the direct market, but it can feel sometimes like a very lonely road. where you're sort of the one pushing because publishers have other priorities. Whereas Kickstarter, it feels like everybody's a priority because that, like I said, a rising tide floats all boats, and what's good for Scott Snyder is good for me. And that's not necessarily the case in the direct market.
Right.
You were mentioning earlier how people view a publishing house as sort of a
Like a badge of legitimacy.
Yes. So thank you. And what's funny is like for me, and I'm not in the comics industry the way any of you guys are,
Sure.
but from my perspective, what I see it as is just another opportunity for gatekeeping to happen. You know, and I know that Aaron's had examples of like pitching a concept and the publisher is like, no, this is not a story that people are going to be interested in. Next
Right.
thing you know, like within the same year, something similar rolls out and it's a huge hit.
Yeah.
And so,
No, I think you
Yay.
hit it. Oh, sorry. Go right ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was like,
No.
yeah, that feeling.
Yep.
Well, I think you're dead on. I mean, I think traditional publishers, and I get it, like there's an element of risk involved. They're putting their money into the book. Printing books is not cheap. If they're paying a page rate, that's certainly not cheap. So there's definitely a certain creative conservatism.
and then if they decide to give you a green light, but they don't necessarily believe in the project, then they're not going to market for you that well. And it's not going to get the attention it needs to actually do well once it's printed.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the dirty secret of the direct market is even if they do believe in it, they're probably never going to market you the way you need.
They just don't have the bandwidth to do it.
They don't have the bandwidth or the staff, or I mean, when you're stuck in these tracks of this is how it's always been done, they're not sort of thinking outside of the box. They are pitching to the core constituencies rather than if they tried to do outreach, it would be insane for them. It'd be like a drop of Kool-Aid trying to convert the ocean. And I totally agree. I mean, every book that I've ever written has been like I pitch it and it's been like a string of no's, and yet every book I've ever written people seem to like. So I think you're absolutely right that publishers they get that tunnel vision and they think okay, like this is what we know works and this is what we're going to stick with, and they're very hesitant to do anything other than that. And I think that's to their detriment. I mean, I think if the industry was a little bit more open and flexible and bold, we could do some really interesting things. I think sometimes the industry confuses being esoteric with being innovative. And
it reminded me kind of what you said at the very beginning, how you were amazed that the artists you work with hadn't been picked up yet. And you hear that all the time. You'll run into editors or publishers that will see your work and say like, oh my God, I can't believe no one's picked you up yet. I'm like, yeah, I know, right? You want to hire me? And then the answer you get is,
right.
It's like, oh, well, that's why they've not been picked up yet.
Yeah. It's the project management side is so time consuming. It's so grinding that the talent scouting is very difficult. At this point, sort of to gain traction, you have to be knocking on the doors all the time. And then still your work has to be so good that they keep hearing about it. And so I think that does make for some, it makes for some insular storytelling for the direct market. Like I can tell you, Going to the Chapel, for example, my last book, Die Hard meets Wedding Crashers. It's bank robbers try to rob a wedding and it goes very, very awry. So many people I pitched that to were like, we love it and we don't know how to sell a rom-com. And the first day the book came out, we got Patton Oswalt tweeting about us. And granted, there's no way I could have predicted that. That was like the absolute luckiest of lucky flukes.
Right.
But I think it speaks to, the readers want new things. They don't want the same, like I love superheroes, but like I want superheroes told in a different way. I love the genre mashups that Brubaker and Fraction did with Iron Fist, or the detective noir stories that Peter David did with X Factor. or like the coming of age stories of Blue Beetle, that Cully Hamner was working on. There's a lot of different angles that we can take, but I think we know that event stories make money. And so that's what we keep kind of leaning back towards, because everyone's so afraid. They're sort of like, how do we get the next quarter's money? And I think it's at risk of saying, how do I make the next 10 quarters worth of money?
How do I build the long-time reader instead of because they're always having to hit quarterly goals to appease stockholders.
Right.
On these bigger companies.
Right.
I'd like to see the numbers for event books for the past 10 years, because I don't believe that it actually makes money.
I don't know.
I think the image, the concept is that, it makes a lot of money and the sales may be there, but if you're not doing the breakdowns of what you had to pay for it to get there, I don't think it's actually making money.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I know their numbers are comparatively strong compared to what is just a month in, month out title. But yeah, I couldn't tell you. It's just, but I think Denise really kind of hit it on the head of just, create, like, it's also, editors have a lot of things competing for their time and their attention. And so they don't want to interact with you unless you give them a real good reason to. And I get it. Like, it's a bandwidth issue and they're looking for reasons to be like, no, because they have so many people competing for their attention. However, I think the downside to that is, because, and this speaks to sort of, how the demographics of comics have traditionally looked versus how we're starting to see the creative teams shift, is there are so many straight white guys, in the industry. And meanwhile, any creators from marginalized communities, they're suddenly expected to be like hitting the ground running from the jump in a machine that is not particularly kind to new creators.
Yeah, you better crack 100,000 copies of this, buddy.
Well, and they are not given the time to develop, because they're sort of expected to kind of carry the entire weight of an entire demographic on their shoulders. And so, and like I said, in a machinery that is increasingly set up for people to fail. I think it's a real challenge to be able to put out double shipped scripts and navigate an event schedule and not know who your creative team's going to be, and sort of get hit with curveballs about whatever your parent company's doing with this particular character. That takes even the most talented of comics writers. People who've been doing this for years have trouble doing it. You're not all going to be Donny Cates. And I think, yeah, it's sort of by virtue of that machinery and by not having done the outreach and not having brought in people from different backgrounds. Now the companies are starting to wake up a little bit, but it's still very stop and start. It's still very narrow, because they still have sort of that core constituency of all the straight white guys who have been working there for years, who they feel obligated to continue to give work. Nobody wants to feel like they're casting aside a creator that they've worked with for years. And so it's really kind of a slow and really painfully incremental process of bringing in diverse voices and then making sure that they're given the runway to succeed, versus sort of throwing them in the meat grinder and then, acting surprised when they say, I hate comics, I'm not doing this ever again.
Right. Yeah, it can churn out some pretty disingenuous feelings for the industry that you work so hard to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's a lot of people, it's like, if you're a famous novelist, and then you deal with comics, which is a very different animal and it has its own share of dysfunctions. And, you suddenly are like, why am I doing this? Like, I thought this was going to be fun. And, so yeah,
nobody said comics was fun ever.
No, yeah, it's just, and I don't mean to poo-poo the direct market super hard. I know that at the end of the day, they're trying, they are just underwater, and I think it's only going to take long-term sustained efforts to do so. And when you have things like AT&T like slitting the wrists, it makes it that much slower and that much harder to get that kind of traction, which will ultimately bring in new readership. So I think it's really incumbent upon the indies to really step up.
Yeah, well, sometimes you got to realize, I think some of the companies like AT&T, they just want to kind of maintain IPs now.
Yeah.
Keep these characters in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah,
because they kind of need that.
Yeah, yep. I mean, they need their tentpoles,
Yeah.
The fact that Tenet's not coming out is like drawing everybody in a tizzy right now. So I definitely get that.
You know what? I could still wait for video for Tenet.
Yeah,
I don't. I don't think the world starts.
I love Christopher Nolan, but I'm not dying for him.
I like Nolan, but that's a whole other conversation.
We've got a couple questions in the chat from YouTube in the chat. Hisham asks, I'm curious how deep into the Oz mythology you're planning on going.
Sure.
Will you be referencing a lot of stuff from later books like Ozma, TikTok, etc.?
It's a great question. Because I really had to thread the needle a little bit. My watchword's always accessibility. Every book that I do, I want to have something universal to it because I'm not looking to preach to the choir. I want converts. Part of the appeal of this book was everybody knows what the Wizard of Oz is. They have that through cultural osmosis. They know Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion. So the fun thing is I read a lot of the L. Frank Baum novels in college. I wrote a class in adolescent literature describing the Land of Oz as almost like a proto superhero universe because Baum was building on mythology and continuity over the course of 20 novels, decades before Stan and Jack ever showed up on the scene. So for me, it really kind of the thing that I wanted to navigate was I wanted to make sure that my mother could read this book, for example, and not have to have read a textbook. But at the same time, we are able to sort of outside of that core group of that core quartet that everybody knows. We're able to kind of dig into some of that mythology of Oz to add extra flavor, particularly in terms of the setting. So, for example, in the original Oz novel, you don't really get to explore the Deadly Desert or the mountaintops of Ix. But I think that kind of adds a little bit more variety in location and natural obstacles. I've considered the OZ to be something like Star Wars, or what's the Mad Max version of Star Wars? You get that grittiness and that intensity, but you also get that sweeping scope of it all, that sense of wonder. What Dagobah is versus Tatooine versus Hoth versus Cloud City just by looking at it. It's got its own unique palette and temperature and high concept, and the Land of Oz is the same way. That said, there were certain things that I couldn't resist. Ozma in particular, I kind of wanted to hold off on because that's a character that there's a lot of narrative potential, particularly in a story like this. So I was kind of like, if we ever got to tell more than the first one, that would be something to save for a later time. And similar to TikTok, although depending on how, we're still drawing the rest of the series. I've written the whole thing. Ruben has drawn the first installment. They're hard at work at part 2 right now. So I wouldn't say never to maybe a TikTok cameo. But I will say Jack Pumpkinhead. I've loved that character for a long time. Loved his design in Return to Oz. And so he plays a nice sized role in this book. And
are the wheelies in it, or they are equally terrifying as they are in Return to Oz?
They maybe as a cameo. Yeah,
this fucking thing scarred me when I was like 12. I was like, what is this?
They are horrifying. So I never say never. But yeah, it was one of those things. I wanted to make sure that it's so interesting because the Baum novels are all public domain. The Judy Garland film that the world knows is not. Right. And so you really kind of I had to navigate, the Oz novel is a little darker than the movie. The movie's been
Mhm.
sanitized for sure, but like the general plot points more or less kind of coalesce together. But things like the ruby slippers, for example, you can't use those. Those are an invention for Technicolor. So
Right.
silver slippers all the way. If anybody wants their no prize, it's because I didn't want to get sued. So yeah, it's really kind of sort of threading that needle between making sure that this is open for everybody, but still having, those bits of Easter eggs, for the diehard fans, and maybe leaving something on the table in case we take another trip back to Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So a next question here.
Yeah.
This one makes me laugh because I think that I in my mind you are the king of the elevator pitch when it comes
Thank
to describing your stories in a very brief manner. But our friend Norm from Texas wants to know how agonizing was it to write the initial pitch for this Kickstarter?
Oh, for the Kickstarter, super agonizing. Because it's I've released books in the direct market, so I've gotten a little bit, like, you always get kind of nervous when it comes out because you don't know how anybody's going to react. But that I've done 3 times and I feel pretty good about it. Kickstarter is like a whole new animal, and so you're really nervous. You're introducing yourself to a brand new community, and so I agonized hard over that. I was gaming out, like, what's the shipping costs going to look like. I have my stamps.com account. I have my scale. I was I was figuring all that out. Figuring out how much should I write in this Kickstarter campaign. Pat Shand, I want to thank him, from Destiny New York and a ton of other amazing Kickstarter books. He looked at my Kickstarter the day before we launched, and he's like, "You need to cut this by at least a third," which is great. It was absolutely the advice I needed. So yeah, the trailer, for example, I cut that myself. Finding music that you can pay a small royalty for to use is agony. Your brains will fall out of their ears after enough time on Pond 5, is the site that I use. But yeah, it was one of those things. It's kind of like writing in general. It's just, you're like, okay, like, this is gonna hurt at first, and then, like, once it's done, you'll feel good about it. But yeah, no, I was sweating bullets the night before. I almost had like a panic attack. There's a button on the back of Kickstarter. A lot of people who've never done a Kickstarter won't know this, but when you're building a Kickstarter, there's a button. You have to get approval of the project, and that takes a few days because a human being needs to look at your project.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a button that says prepare to launch. Sunday night before my Kickstarter launches, I'm like sweating bullets. I'm like, what does prepare to launch mean? Is this the actual button to go to launch? Why would they call it this? Or am I going to have to go through another round of approvals? Is this Kickstarter that I've been promoting for the last few weeks coming out, saying it's coming out tomorrow? Is it just going to have to wait a few days? I was just like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And my girlfriend, who is a very lovely, patient person, wound up going on her phone and looking it up. And she's like, do you want to know what it is? And I was like, I can't look. And she's like, it's just a button that then gives you like a checkbox to say, like, are you sure you're ready for this? And then you can launch. And I was like, well, why do I need the prepare to launch button then? Why do I need the checkbox? Just give me the launch button. So, there's no winning. But yeah, it definitely, I try to be as deliberate about it as I can. It's a very different animal than most writing that I do. But thankfully the Kickstarter infrastructure is very intuitive. It's very easy to use. Yeah. I certainly like it a lot more than WordPress, for example. But yeah, I definitely spent probably 2 to 3 weeks working on it, and sort of gaming out what kind of tiers I was going to offer at what prices, trying to make sure that I had everything at a level that anybody at any budget could participate in this book. But yeah, I mean, and still, there's still things that I'm kind of learning. For example, we have some very limited edition Spencer and Locke plushies on the Kickstarter. And I intentionally set that at a high price because it's a piece of history. And whether or not we sell all of those, there's a part of me that doesn't want to give them up. So, it's definitely a learning curve. But yes, I definitely agonized quite a bit over the writing of that. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. Let's see. I think there was a few more questions. I'm gonna look
Yeah,
at.
hit me.
There was a second part to that Norm's question, which was what was your music of choice while creating the book?
Oh, well, creating the book. Boy, somebody asked me this the other day, and I wish I had a better answer than I don't remember. Because I wrote this book a while back. The book was finished, the scripts were finished before the pandemic. So that's like how long I've been working on this. And the first script I wrote, I think, it was sometime in 2017. So, boy, I couldn't tell you. I do feel like there was a song from Logan, Way Down We Go. I think I listened to that a lot because I actually was developing the OZ concurrently with Spencer and Locke 2, which had our villainous analog of Beetle Bailey. So I felt like as I was writing those books, it was kind of like two sides of the same coin.
Right.
And so I think that was a pretty formative song. But boy, for me, I tend to, instead of bouncing around from song to song, I find one song that sort of gets me in that right energy and that right mood and that right mindset, and I just put it on repeat until the images start to hit me a bit. And then when that song stops working, then I try to find another one. And I basically just stick with songs until I kind of get myself across the finish line.
Nice.
Sorry, Norm. I wish I had a better answer for you.
I always like to ask this on Kickstarter creators, because I was asked this myself.
Yeah.
So you personally, out of all of the various reward levels, which one do you think is worth the most bang for their buck? If you're like, all right, if you could only pick one level,
If you could
this
only
is the one I
pick,
this
one
is the level I'd pick personally.
Well, there's the ones that I would pick, and let me actually open up the Kickstarter so I can get the actual name for it. But I think honestly, my favorite is just kind of where you get all of my stuff. And so there's let's see what we called it. Not the well, there's the Skype session with me. You're going to get a lot of bang for your buck there. There is, come on, where are you? All covers and trades. All covers and trades for 115. You get not only all 4 covers of the OZ, but you also get all 3 trades that I've worked on in the past. Plus, you're getting things like you're getting a PDF of my script. Almost every single tier gets that. You're getting digital files of Ruben's inks, his raw inks, and Whitney Kogar's untouched colors. You're going to get PDFs of the first issues of my books as well. But yeah, I mean that's the real meat and potatoes one you've got. But I also think, talking with me on Skype, I think we have a couple of those left. Ruben Rojas, I think, might have 1 or 2 commissions left. Nice. He's so talented that anybody should be asking for his work. But I think getting everything I've got, I think we make that, I think, fairly affordable, and then you get to know me with everything I've written.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
I'm impressed that there are several Kickstarter levels that the rewards are no longer available because they hit the maximum number of backers for each of them.
Yeah. And I couldn't be more excited about that. I couldn't be more grateful, because it's we're trying to just add something to our readership. For example, getting drawn in the book, all our cameos are gone. It's challenging for a book like the OZ where there's very few human characters to fit human beings. So that's actually something that Ruben Rojas is currently working on. But it's just been it's been nice. I think it's been a nice combination of people that I know, but also just complete strangers, which is I was expecting these numbers to be like half my family, and I don't have this many members of my family. I think it's something I checked the other day, and I think it was like 20% people I knew, but that was like 150 people ago.
Right.
200 people ago. So I think it might be increasingly less, which is that's good. I'm glad because my girlfriend doesn't have enough like aunts and uncles to sustain my comics career.
But they can get you by for a little while.
They can be, get me by for a little while. That's all we need. Just a little bit of attraction.
Got another question here from the listeners. Listener Ace says that they are an artist and not a writer who is now writing a script. So they are asking for any of your brief words of wisdom.
Yeah. Well, first off, congratulations, Ace. Good for you for taking that leap. The fact that you're an artist trying to work on scripts, you've already got the hard part down. So my advice for learning how to work on scripts, first off, start small. I wrote a short script a day for 90 days. That's how I kind of got my start. They were terrible scripts, by the way, like nothing that will ever be for public consumption. But it kind of let me learn the structure a little bit, sort of the introduction to the character, the world, the concept, what have you, kind of, an inciting event, which usually kind of gets tucked into that, it's sort of a mise en scene kind of thing. Then, what's the kind of midpoint twist that you don't know, the whole game has changed. The whole direction has changed. And then the cliffhanger, are they going to make it? If they do make it, it's a comedy or a drama. If they don't make it, it's a tragedy. And just do that. Literally 6 pages. It does not matter how good the concept is. That I've done terrible concepts. To show when I was doing this was the summer that Charlie Sheen had his breakdown. So like one of my scripts I distinctly remember was like Rock Stars from Mars. And it was like some terrible, this is Spinal Tap, like rip off. It doesn't even have to be super original. Like I said, all you have to do is put the reps in. In fact, I would wholeheartedly recommend that as you put in these reps, do not put pressure on yourself to print them, to publish them. It's just it's getting prison ripped, like you're in this small little box and you're kind of building up those muscle groups. I'd recommend that. The other thing I'd recommend is if there are any comics that you like, take those comics and reverse engineer the scripts. Scott Snyder told me, I'm sure he doesn't do this anymore, but he used to reverse engineer Batman Year One every year, once a year. And that way you kind of get to learn, what's the pacing of it all? How many panels do I think I can fit on a page? How many word balloons, are there going to be on this page for it to fit? As an artist, you probably have a decent sense of how much you can draw, but it's always good to kind of learn pacing and structure from somebody else.
Right.
So I think whatever books that really speak out to you. And then once you've sort of put in a bunch of reps that way, then you can start to kind of branch out a little. You can say, okay, you can do some anthology stories if you want something really short and published. I found that doing just a short mini series was particularly the most bang for my buck. I wrote a first issue. Did I like the first issue? If the answer is yes, then you can write an outline for the rest of it. If you don't, then throw it in the trash or let it sit in the drawer and think of something else. Ultimately, this is just like drawing. I don't think that you draw in full rendering at the jump. You're doing your blue lines, and then you're doing sort of the sketchy lines, and then you're doing sort of your harder inks, and then you're doing your rendering and your shading and your coloring. It's all scaffolding. The next step is scaffolding to the next step, and it's the same way in writing. Something else that I found is really helpful is breaking it down in as many steps as you can. So I do an outline. It's just anything goes. You just sort of figure out what can I tell. What am I going to tell for this story? And then I break it down page to page. I call it a beat sheet, but it's just like, this is the action that I can fit on this page. And I've got 20 pages or I've got 22 pages. Can I fit all the action I want to in those 22 pages? If not, something's got to get cut. I think that really takes a lot of the pressure off of me. And that means that when I start getting into the scripting stage, I can say, I know what action is going to happen here. And so I can just have fun doing the dialogue or the narration. The other thing I would say, and you'll learn this more if you reverse engineer a script, you're going to figure out real quick what the max you can fit on a page is. For me, I consider kind of my hard and fast rule, unless I'm doing a 9-panel grid, 4 to 6 panels a page, try to keep it on the lower side, have a couple splash pages ready just to, give yourself or somebody else a break. I like that. I try not to have more than 17 word balloons per page. That's sort of my hard and fast, number. and I try not to have more than 22 words per balloon. Although sometimes when I have big words, that kind of throws that metric out the window.
Yeah.
That's sort of my personal preference. You may have something else. You may say, oh, I want Jeff Loeb, for example. He's writing most of his books at 3-panel pages. They're sort of big, widescreen storytelling. You have somebody like when Brendan Fletcher and Babs Tarr were working on Batgirl together, they were having like 7 and 8 panel pages. James Tynion does that a lot, with his Batman books. So you'll figure out kind of the pacing that works for you, and that won't kill you as an artist or some other unlucky artist.
Like I remember when I worked on Lazarus, Greg would actually have me count on every page. He's like, if you go over 12 balloons, you better have a really good reason for doing it, per page. And I remember going back to the script going, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm good there.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, Greg especially is the type, just having read his work, but yeah, he a little goes a long way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm a little wordy, but that's what I'm saying is that like there, as a different creator, you will have a different metric that you consider okay. And Greg is much smarter than me, so I should be probably stripping it down to 12 myself.
I still do it. What I'm doing now, I will still count on it. I will still count on every single page. Like, okay, how late can I get in on here, and how quickly can I leave? Kind of.
Absolutely, it's like that's Mammoth. Get in late and get out early.
Only Alan Moore can get away with like paragraphs and paragraphs.
Yeah,
and every artist wants to kill him.
That was a nice and thorough answer.
Yeah, I think about this stuff a lot.
It's actually we got to actually wrap it up here. That's kind of a good spot to wrap the show up tonight.
Yeah,
agreed.
So the Kickstarter is, you just go to if you just type in the OZ on Kickstarter, it's going to come right up.
Yeah.
But we'll also make sure we link it everywhere.
There are 2 results if you go OZ, but one of them is obviously the comic and the other one is some other business.
Well, I can, if you go to bit.ly/the OZ comic, that'll take you straight to our Kickstarter page.
Oh, nice.
And you can also follow the book on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the OZ comic. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, Pepose D, or David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, which is at bit.ly/pepnews. And otherwise, thank you guys for having me. Thank you to all your listeners for your amazing questions. Every backer matters and every dollar counts on Kickstarter. I'm doing this to build the widest possible readership. Right now we're just behind 800 backers, and I want to cross that milestone. And I want to make sure you guys know we're adding a lot of bang for your buck. We're not telling this story for shock value for the shock value's sake. That's not how I do things. I think we've justified the story narratively with the original Bomb mythos, and we've gotten characters that we treat with compassion and respect and empathy, because ultimately I believe that's how we treat our readers. If you've liked any of my books like Spencer and Locke, I think you're going to love the OZ, because working with this team, this is some of the best work that I've ever had the privilege of working on.
Yeah, it's really solid work. So I'm jazzed to check out more of it.
Cool. I will mention that in the time that we've been recording the show today, I think you gained an additional $150 to $200.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear. Thank you to our backers. I promise you, we're bringing our A game to this. We're not going to let you down.
Nice. Well, David, man, it's great to have you on again.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me, and thank you again for these awesome questions.
Yeah, and if we ever have shows again, we'll be crashing in each other's apartments and houses.
Please. Looking forward to it. Fried egg I'm in love. Love that place.
Oof.
I might have a bottle of their magic egg dust to send down to you.
Did you say magic egg dust?
What they put on their sandwiches. You can buy it. Which, spoilers, it's apparently just pepper and cayenne pepper, but I don't know.
I don't care. I'll take it. That sounds good.
That sounds magic.
Awesome.
It is magical.
Well, thank you so much, guys. And have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Go get some sleep.
Yeah, will do.
All right, man. Bye.
Cat's over here knocking my shit over.
I know. Claymore.
One of these days, she's going to boot me out of the Zoom app.
Or we're just going to have nothing but cat butt while you're like, woof.
I try to keep her butt out of the camera.
Cats do what they do.
I know.
This is true.
Yeah, it's cool to have David on again. We probably should be wrapping up the show this week. Next week, is it building character again?
Yes, it is. Yes, we are building character next week. Wait,
Then
am I
after
looking at
that, we
this
are
right?
taking a week off.
Indeed, we
'Cause we're
are.
doing a retreat.
Hold on. Let me make sure I'm
Hold
looking
on.
at that correctly.
I will tease a little that we may have, even though we're taking a week off, we may have a little something special to say. So we will definitely
right.
let folks know beforehand.
Yeah.
Special
they might-
surprise.
A
They
little
might get
special
little-
something.
They might get little treats.
Mhm.
Special treats.
Special treats for our geek friends.
Boop, boop,
I don't know
Well-
why I did that. It just came out of me.
boop, boop.
Just go with it. Go with it. Whoa.
Sorry, my cat is just fucking everything up over here.
It's all right. That's what they do.
That is what cats
And
do.
now she sounds mad. Well, with that,
Oh, dog.
I'm Aaron Duran.
I'm Pinarita.
And I'm Cable Hashitani.
Separate these two. Oh, don't forget to donate to the Black Resilience Fund.
And as always, Ted Wheeler, you need to resign. Asshole.
Brad and Teresa Radford.
Sure, go for it. Let's all have an end line now.
I don't know about that.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, wait, no, I'm.